to a cutting Hill. He darts in.
Whoa! People actually subscribe.
All across Central New York.
Time expired! Syracuse has done it!
It's Drive Time with your host, Tim Leonard.
Hey, guess what? I'm getting one. Hey!
We welcome you into Drive Time. Happy Friday to everyone out there in Central New York. All of you listening on ESPN Syracuse, ESPN Utica Rome, all of you watching us on QSportsTalk.com or our Q Sports Talk YouTube page. Had no show yesterday because the women's basketball game, boy, what a game that was. 6 p.m. start. I didn't get out of there until like 9:15 at night. That was a 2.5-hour, 3-overtime thriller and a true instant classic inside the Dome last night. And the good news is Syracuse won it, so we can talk about it being an instant classic. I made the joke during the broadcast last night that, you know, we always talk about the 6-overtime game. The people at UConn, they don't talk about the 6-overtime game. They don't really care about it that much. But we at Syracuse, we care about it a whole lot. And we care about the 3-overtime win a whole lot last night from the women's team. That was a crazy game. Syracuse should not have gone to overtime, and you can nitpick what they did at the end of the game. And wasn't the prettiest win ever, but it was a win. And there were some unbelievable moments in that game last night. We'll talk some about that throughout our show today. Here with you for an hour, 5 to 6 p.m. as always on weeknights. Phone lines are open at 315-437-7644. We've got a lot of football to discuss as well. Of course, some men's basketball, too. Cuse men's basketball team is back in action tomorrow. They're flying out to Boston College right now. Quick trip to Conti Forum, which is usually infested with Syracuse fans for these games. And the Ken Pom and the Bart Torvik and the projections maybe give BC a better shot than the average Syracuse fan would think. BC is 7-10 on the season. They are about 5-point underdogs on Bart Torvik, 6-point underdogs on Ken Pom. I think we all collectively are expecting Syracuse to go there and keep playing well and keep winning games by 8 or more points like they have in their last 3 games. This feels like the weakest opponent to this point in the season, at least ACC season for Syracuse. So we'll see if they can make it a 4-game winning streak for the men's basketball team tomorrow. We can dive into that matchup a little bit as well. Coaching news coming out today for Syracuse football. New quarterback coach. We'll get into that. And the portal, final day here to enter the transfer portal. And it appears Duke has lost their star quarterback, Darian Mensah. What a sport college football is right now. Darian Mensah getting paid reportedly $4 million a year to go play football for Duke. Has a great year. It feels like Duke is going to bring him back and bring their entire offense back. Remember their great wide receiver, Cooper Barkate. He probably could have gone elsewhere. He decided to stay at Duke. And on the last day of the portal, it seems that Miami has swooped in and offered him an even bigger bag. And I don't understand how he can get out of the contract and if he can truly get that bag. And the speculation out there of some of the stuff that Miami is offering him is very college football in 2026. But it seems that Miami, who is focused on a national championship and didn't reel in a portal quarterback, and remember that they kind of swooped in late last year to get Carson Beck and sort of flip him from maybe the NFL draft. It seems they have flipped Darian Mensah, or at least some big-time school is going to pay him a boatload of money, which I thought $4 million for a quarterback is a boatload of money. But what do I know in this day and age in college football? It is a weird and wild time in college football right now. And from a Duke perspective, if they just lost their quarterback on the last day of the portal, hand up, I don't have the full breakdown of Duke's current quarterback situation and their backups. I know that Rich Bielen's brother is one of them, I believe, Henry Bielen, and he had a tie to Syracuse at one point and was recruited by the Orange. And I think he did play briefly at the end of that game inside the Dome when Duke won handedly, but I don't know who Duke's going to go to at this point. They probably can't go to anyone. Will they keep everyone on their roster? It's a fascinating time in college football with the Darian Mensah situation right now. So we'll get into all of that and more as we continue with the show today. Also, we'll chat with Chris Brown as we get you ready for the NFL weekend and our Football Friday to come with Gio, as always. That's all ahead here on Drive Time. Let's start things off on our Burdick BMW of Cicero opening drive by going to the phone lines early to go to one of our loyal callers. That is Nick in Las Vegas. What's happening, Nick?
What's up, partner? How are you?
Doing great. Crazy final day of the portal here. I'm sure you saw the Duke Darian Mensah stuff, right?
I did. Talk to me about how that's not tampering. Holy cow.
I
Crazy,
know.
isn't it?
Well, there's a lot of tampering going on at this point, clearly. So, I mean, the situation with Michael Smith and all that in South Carolina, it feels like he is going to South Carolina. It feels like there's just so much tampering going on that why even inquire about tampering to an extent at this point, given the nature of the portal?
So a couple things I just wanted to call and touch on. First of all, I wanted to give you kudos. Your call last night on the game winner when Darius hit that three, one of the best radio calls I've heard in a long, long time.
Oh, thank you, Nick. I appreciate that. That was a fun game to call last night. I was joking with everyone in the office today that I think it was like an hour straight of not taking a break because we went into overtime and we don't have OT breaks built. So we just kept going and going. But I had plenty to talk about, of course, and it was a whole lot of fun to call that game. A lot of twists and turns.
Well, one of the best Syracuse radio calls I've heard in a long time. So nice job on that, Tim.
Appreciate that.
And then the other thing I wanted to say is, so now that the portal is pretty much closed, I think the hire for Coach Ryan is tremendous. I think the Tom Coughlin calling and getting him the rave recommendation made it a no-brainer for Fran, and I think it's going to do wonders for the offense. So, because he's got familiarity with working with Nixon as well, so I think that's a really big-time hire. Overall, I think the coaching changes, I would grade it as an overall A in the offseason. And as far as the players go, and I'm interested to see what you would grade it, my grade for the players' additions and subtractions, I would say was a B-. So just wanted to see what your thought on that was, and then that's about it.
All right, Nick, good stuff as always. Leading us off, getting me into what I wanted to talk about with football. We appreciate you checking in. There's Nick in Las Vegas. And that's a good question. What would I grade the coaching staff hires? What would I grade the transfer portal subtractions and additions to this point? I talked a lot during the transfer portal subtraction phase before the portal window officially opened about how that leads to panic and the number and actually tracking how many players. I think it ended up being 28, 29, something like that for Syracuse that left. It was really like 3 players that left. If you want to add a Caleb Singleton, a Derek McDonald, you could get to 4, 5, 6 players. I was going to say if you want to add Umari Hatcher, but he's coming back to Syracuse, it seems like, or at least is going to appeal for a waiver for one final season. So I would not pay attention to the number of players that went into the portal. If you want to look at who Syracuse lost in the portal, go look at the schools in which those guys are going to, and go look at the number of players that are still without a school at this point. And you have a couple more days probably after the portal window officially closes to agree to sign to a new school, because you have to enroll before the new semester. You've got a couple of days to enroll before the new semester in most cases around the country, but this is the final day to enter the portal. And I think we know at this point who is coming to Syracuse out of the portal and who is leaving Syracuse out of the portal. The player grade, I would probably say, is in the neighborhood of a B, like Nick said. It's just tough to evaluate. There's a lot of guys that they're banking on their high school talent and background coming out of high school, and they're trying to find maybe like a post-type sleeper, someone that was a top 100, top 200 recruit, but didn't really play much. And they're not necessarily proven, but they were at a Penn State, a Florida State. Michael Smith seems like he's not coming, but that was a guy from South Carolina. So there were plenty of guys that they went after from bigger schools, including the UCLA offensive lineman that became official that they have added him as of today, thanks to some good reporting from our friend Mike McAllister over at 24/7 Sports. Then there's the opposite, like the backup quarterback, Amari Odom, proven production, but it came at Kennesaw State. Or Cole Weaver, the Miami of Ohio wide receiver, proven production, but it came at Miami of Ohio. I went into the portal and I was very clear about what I thought they needed to address the most, which was backup quarterback and in the trenches, offensive line and defensive line. They added one offensive lineman who was a late add to us. Now, I don't know when he officially was on board for Fran Brown and company, but to us, we found out about a UCLA offensive lineman, kind of a backup offensive lineman today that is coming to Syracuse. That's their one addition there in terms of offensive line from the portal. They did a very good job in the defensive line position group, I would say. I would give D-line probably an A for what they added there and the amount of production they brought in, the amount of veteran players. I think D-line was a weakness on the roster last year. I think we all saw that. I think it's going to be one of the better position groups next year based on what they have added in the transfer portal there at defensive line. So I give them a lot of props for what they did there. I think backup quarterback was a very tough needle to thread, and I give them props for what they did there because getting two quarterbacks, we found out about another one today in Danny Lauder, who is the Georgetown transfer quarterback, bothered by injuries this past year and limited to just 3 games, but put up good numbers last year in 10 games, pocket passer type quarterback. He's clearly QB3 in my eyes, but he's a better QB3 than they had certainly last year. And they have a better QB2, I think, than certainly last year. Now, it's still just hard to really give a grade on players because last year we thought Ricky Collins was probably a B or a B-plus addition. Some of you now, with the benefit of hindsight bias, would argue that and say, no, he was unproven. We were questioning it. I think that type of stuff comes to the forefront of your mind now that you know what happened. At the time, coming off the 10-win season, we had a lot of faith in Fran Brown, and we had a lot of faith that Fran Brown had an eye for talent, and the LSU backup was going to translate, and his talent was going to translate. The same way that I'm sitting here right now, and I feel like betting on the Florida State wide receiver, Elijah Moore, probably going to translate. I think that's a good, talented, physical wide receiver that's got great measurables. I would imagine that translates, but we don't know for sure. It's hard, really, to put a grade on the portal players and the coaching staff. I think they did a very good job in terms of the defensive coordinator position, and I think that was probably the biggest hire. I think they did a very good job in terms of defensive line, which was one of the biggest position groups. I don't mind necessarily that maybe wide receiver and running back are the two position groups where they suffered the biggest losses, and they have gone from proven production to less proven production. If you would have told me going into the portal process, you could trade wide receiver proven production for defensive line proven production, I would have taken that trade any day of the week. I think under Jeff Nixon, under this offense with Steve Angeli back and hopefully healthy, I'm very confident that they will have enough at the skill positions. I also feel that you can succeed as a freshman, a sophomore, an underclassman at skill positions, but it's tough to succeed in the trenches as a freshman or an underclassman. You have to build some weight. You have to hit the weight room a little bit. And that makes you feel better about what you have in those position groups. So overall, I would probably say about a B for the coaching staff and about a B for the portal players. But really, it's TBD is the answer to the question, honestly. And I'm not usually the person that tries to kick the questions down the road. But until we hear from Fran Brown, until I kind of learn more about his vision and what the coaching staff saw in all these players, and maybe some more stories trickle out of why they went after player X and player Y and how they fit into the scheme and so on and so forth. And then we start hearing some rumblings from spring camp. It's hard for me to say. I mean, last year I made the point a couple shows ago that I thought Tyshawn Russell never really got the praise that maybe he deserved. It never felt like the fan base was that in on Tyshawn Russell. Now he is one of the star, I guess, wide receivers that is returning. No one out there really knows Tyshawn Russell's name or cares about him that much. Maybe he's a guy that come October, we're talking about him a lot. And I think some of that is just sort of under wraps right now, how good each player is. We're all guessing. We're all trying to fill in the clues there. But as it stands right now, when it comes to the football offseason, coming off a 3-win season, I feel like Fran Brown did a very good job at upgrading the staff. And I trust Fran Brown is going to bring in talent. And I love that he brought in a top 30 high school recruiting class, because there's not many coaches around the country that could come to Syracuse and bring in a top 30 high school recruiting class. Now let's see if they can develop it, and it'll be a fascinating season to watch and discuss as we get closer to it. We're off and running here on Drive Time. That's our Burdick BMW of Cicero opening drive. We'll take a timeout. We will chat with Chris Brown of the Buffalo Bills radio network on the other side. Caught up with him earlier today before he made his trip out to Denver for the divisional round game. Remember, tomorrow, 4:30, it's the Bills and the Broncos. We'll discuss that matchup, injury news, everything you need to know about that game with Chris Brown as we return on Drive Time. Yeah, you'll come to me like normal out of the break, and then as soon as I say, like, here's Chris Brown, just fade that over, yeah? Mike, I love how... Great to see you, Mike, in the chat. I miss you. I love how every time you refer to how excited you are for Drive Time, it has some drug relationship to it. You're always like, this hits like crack. But I love it. Miss you, Mike. Gavendo on a 15-stream streak. Can the men's team go on a 4-game winning streak? Gavendo is streaking. Eight wins is probably, I don't know, maybe ceiling. I would go 9 bowling ball. 8 wins would be a great season. I would sign up for 8 wins right now and run to the bank. But yeah, I mean, the roster it's still young. You might be right. It might be 8 wins. It's a young roster that my guess is Vegas will set the over-under at like 5.5. Not that that means Syracuse can't outdo that, of course. They've outdone that number several times, like Fran Brown's first year. Yeah, Philly, you got them going to the CFP, right? Like Paulie? 10-2 would be something. I mean, I don't think they really have many all-ACC players on the roster preseason, right? I mean, not that that means everything again, but Demetrius Samuel, Antoine Delorier maybe. You know, people will talk about Calvin Russell, but he's not going to be on a list like that as a true freshman. Am I forgetting anyone? I mean, if college football, the video game, is doing the rankings, like, I guess the best player right now is Samuel or Delorier, maybe. Usually those video games praise the running backs and wide receivers, and that's where they took a little bit of a hit in the portal. But like I said, I don't really care about that. Well, it's not basketball, so we can pull from Georgetown, right? I think they just need another QB for the roster. And, I mean, he's better than a high school kid, I would say, for sure. I think they did great at QB.
ESPN 97.7 and 100.1. Watch live on QSportsTalk.com.
Welcome back into Drive Time on a Friday afternoon. We're about to do our Football Friday. Big football weekend once again coming up. Hopefully it's not the final weekend for the Buffalo Bills and the final time we chat with our weekly guest, Chris Brown of the Buffalo Bills Radio Network. Usually chat with Chris live. We had to tape it earlier today because Chris Brown is in the air right now, heading towards the Mountain Time Zone, making that long flight. And we'll see what the Bills have tomorrow as they take on the Broncos. You can listen to the game and Chris Brown on the call on the Buffalo Bills Radio Network on our K-Rock station tomorrow. 4:30 kickoff tomorrow for the divisional round Bills and the Broncos. Without further ado, though, let's pick up our conversation with Chris Brown from earlier today. All right, time now for our weekly visit with the Bills play-by-play man, Chris Brown. And we didn't know if we'd have another weekly visit when we left you last week, Chris, but the Bills survived and advanced, to borrow a term from college basketball a little bit. A gutsy performance from Josh Allen, to say the least, and did enough to get it done on the road in the wild card round against the Jags. That had to be just a really fun game to call and an awesome performance to watch from Josh Allen in particular.
Yeah, 4 lead changes in the fourth quarter alone. So, yeah, an entertaining game that came down to the wire on a weekend where a lot of the wild card games went that way, with the exception of one. So, yeah, to see the game kind of ping pong back and forth in the fourth quarter like that, everybody kind of had their heart in their throat. But the Bills stage, a come from behind fourth quarter drive, take the lead with a minute remaining, and then put it on their defense to finish it, and they do it on just one play.
Yeah, got the interception there at the end of the game on the first pass from Trevor Lawrence. And I don't know what more we can really say about Josh Allen at this point. And I know that there's a lot of discussion about him and how this is the year for the Bills because there's no other quarterbacks that are at his level that are left in the AFC. But to see him put together a performance like that on the road, dealing with some injuries and just the way he gutted it out, just how impressive was it to watch him in particular in that game?
Yeah, I thought his decision-making was on point. There are times where you can tell, if you've watched enough of Josh Allen early on, if he is locked in, and he looked pretty locked in from the start of the game. And he's got a road that includes a lot of formidable defenses here in front of him. Last week, obviously, with the Jaguars, who had the number 1 run defense, and now you've got the Broncos, who lead the league in sacks and have the number 2 run defense. But he does not blink. And I think Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator, had a great idea going into Week 18, knowing he wasn't going to play. He had Josh sit back and self-scout himself while they had Mitch Trubisky get ready to play the Jets in Week 18. And so as a result, you had a guy really looking at all the things that he had left out there on the field through his own decision-making. And when we asked him about it, he's like, I missed a lot. There's a lot out there that I missed. And I think it served as a very valuable reminder to him that I just need to take what the defense gives me and keep our offense on schedule. And more often than not, we'll find ourselves in the red zone, and we know how to put points on the board after that. So I thought that worked very well for his psyche going into the playoffs.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you remember a time in previous years where they did something comparable to that? The idea of self-scouting there? I mean, it seems like the takeaway you're portraying there is that he doesn't have to be Superman maybe as much as he was trying to be in some instances, which we know Josh Allen can put on the cape at times, but it's important to also harness that in a little bit at times too.
Yeah, I talked to Joe Brady about it, the offensive coordinator, and he basically said, because I asked him, what kind of spawned that idea, And he said, look, too often when we're reviewing his film, it's after the season is over. And we're saying, okay, well, these are things we can work on next year and this and that. He goes, why not address it now so you can be better on some of those things you missed in the playoffs when it counts the most? So I think he saw an opportunity there, knowing Josh wasn't going to be bogged down with a game plan for week 18 against the Jets. Said, hey, go spend your time over here with this so you can gear up for the playoffs. And I don't know. I'm sure it's been done somewhere at some time by some coach over the 100+ years of the NFL, but I haven't heard it often.
Yeah, I think that's a smart move and certainly worked out. Did you notice anything that maybe surprised you about the Bills' game plan at all, knowing all that, or how they addressed attacking Jacksonville? And even you could flip it around to what the Bills did defensively to try and slow down the Jags' offense. Anything at all surprise you game plan-wise?
I don't know that it surprised me, but I was glad to see Joe Brady pivot when it was clear that the run game was not getting enough traction to keep them on schedule down and distance-wise. He pivoted off of the run game and used Khalil Shakir as a replacement for the run game. People were knocking the fact that he had only 82 yards on 12 receptions, but the 4 and 6 yard and 8 yard gains that Shakir was getting on a consistent basis was essentially the replacement for the run game and kept them on schedule down and distance wise. So I thought that was a very good pivot move by Brady in the game offensively. And then defensively, they've just been flat out amazing. You even hear people like Dan Orlovsky on ESPN and other people on national shows talking about some of the Star Wars-like disguises that the Bills are using in pass coverage and changing the picture post-snap. It was very interesting to see the Jaguars try to force the Bills' defense to show what their play call was. Early in the game, they snapped it quick to almost prompt the Bills to get into what their actual play call was. That didn't work. Then later in the game, they were running the play clock all the way down to try to get them to jump into what their true play call was, and that didn't work either. They don't move until after the snap, and I don't know how they get to their landmarks on time when they're in a completely different area, but somehow, some way, they make it work, and they make good quarterbacks hesitate, and that lets their rush get home.
Yeah, it's a fascinating game of chess, I guess, when you get into the NFL postseason. Chris Brown with us right now, the Buffalo Bills play-by-play man. And now we look towards the matchup against Denver. And you hit on some of the key stats with Denver earlier and their defense and what a challenge this is going to be, continuing to go on the road and making the long trip out there. What are the matchups or the chess moves or the things that fascinate you about this game coming up against Denver?
Yeah, I do think that the Bills' run game is going to have to be more effective than it was last week. You cannot get into a drop-back passing game against this pass rush. They will eat Josh alive. And the Bills did a great job of that in last year's wild card game against Denver. Granted, it was in Buffalo, but James Cook ran wild. They had over 200 rushing yards and over 40 minutes time of possession. Denver scored the first touchdown, then they just scored 31 unanswered on him and left him in the dust. I think it will be a much closer game this time around. The Broncos come in supremely confident, winners of 13 of their last 14. We should note that they had the second easiest schedule in the NFL this year. And if you look up and down their schedule, they didn't play a lot of top-flight NFL running backs. They're going to face the leading rusher in the league in James Cook. They don't give up a lot of yardage on the edges because they are an athletic, fast defense. That's their MO. But their biggest defensive lineman is 305 pounds, and the Bills outweigh them by a sizable margin. So I think they have a chance to kind of move them out of spots and create creases between the tackles for James Cook to exploit. And look, Cook doesn't need to go off for like 150 or 175. If he's somewhere between 90 and 115, I think that's effective enough to keep this Broncos defense honest and keep their pass rush at bay.
Chris Brown with us right now, the Buffalo Bills play-by-play man. And a lot of our chats this year, Chris, unfortunately have been centered around injuries. And it's been quite the injury-plagued year for the Bills overall. I know everyone wants to know about Ed Oliver, and there are a couple key injuries that we found out about this week. What's the latest you can share as we're chatting here a day before the game on the injury front for Buffalo?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a good chance that Ed Oliver will be activated. He's been chomping at the bit for weeks now. My office is right off the field house at One Bills Drive, and I've seen him work with the strength and conditioning staff for weeks, desperate to get back. This week, they had him on Monday working against two different offensive linemen at the same time. And even though he practiced on a limited basis all week and is listed as questionable, I anticipate he'll be up for the game. Because I think, they look at it this way, even though he's had a 3-month layoff, if they believe he can give them 25 to 30 quality snaps, he's a force multiplier for their pass rush, because you have to account for him on the inside. And now that affords the Bills more one-on-one matchups for Joey Bosa and Greg Rousseau on the outside. At receiver, I think Curtis Samuel's going to get moved off of IR and onto the active roster, because you only have 3 healthy receivers right now with the loss of Gabe Davis and Tyrell Shavers. And then I think you're either looking at McCole Hardman as an elevation from the practice squad to give you 5. And that could be good from the standpoint of taking some of the punt return load off of Khalil Shakir, who's got enough on his plate on offense. So my guess would be Samuel and Hardman up at receiver. And I think Oliver is going to be up. I think he's going to play in this game.
All right, great insight as always, Chris. Hopefully we are chatting with you again next week, but safe travels out to Denver and enjoy the game out there.
All right, thanks, Tim. Good to be with you.
All right, there is Chris Brown. Always great to chat with Chris Brown, and like I said, hopefully we are chatting with him again next week. Remember, Bills Broncos tomorrow on our K-Rock station, 4:30 kickoff for that one. Big breaking news that just happened for Syracuse football in the transfer portal. Nick called in and he asked me to grade the Syracuse football players that they brought in the portal. And I just said about 15 minutes ago, I think they've done a good job at quarterback. And I think they're done. I think we know everyone that is coming to Syracuse and everyone that is leaving. And Syracuse has gone out and gotten a commitment in the portal on the final day of the portal window from Malachi Nelson, who was a former 5-star recruit at quarterback. Pete Thamel reporting that he is coming to Syracuse to compete for the job. So we will tell you more about Malachi Nelson, a very interesting late portal pickup here for Syracuse. He is a former 5-star recruit, but he hasn't really done anything at college. Started at USC, went to Boise State, didn't really play at either of those stops, and wasn't very good last year at UTEP. So this will be fascinating to try and dive into what exactly Fran Brown is trying to get out of adding Malachi Nelson and try and theorize what this all means. But it is a third quarterback out of the portal that Fran Brown is adding. He told us he wanted to add 2. He is adding 3 quarterbacks out of the portal. And according to Pete Thamel, Malachi Nelson, the former number 1 overall recruit, literally the number 1 player in the 2023 class, according to ESPN, and a 5-star consensus recruit in 2023 that has not lived up to his billing at all, is coming to Syracuse. We'll talk more about that as Drive Time continues here on ESPN Radio and CuseSportsTalk.com.
This is Orange.
It's adorable, but I don't care about it. I like playing with puppies. I like dogs.
That was it, Philly. Just the one from, I shouldn't say it definitively. I said that was it for quarterback a minute ago. But yeah, just the one from UCLA is all we know right now. Yeah, Ryan. That's a name that I remember hearing about, and we'll get into it, but he went to high school with Lemon, the wide receiver that was at USC, and I think they shattered records there. It is weird how he just hasn't done anything, but it also shows you like the recruiting rankings are only one part of it. I mean, we got to wait and see how good Calvin Russell is when he gets here, Yeah, I don't understand how Cal does it, or Stanford. I haven't really asked today, Ryan, but I did see Layla was getting interviewed. I mean, we'll see. I'm not too worried about the injury as of what I saw last night, but I'll keep you updated if I hear anything. JJ's hand's all good. Red sort of joked with us yesterday. Well, joked with Stephen Pauly. But there's nothing to worry about there, I don't think. I'd imagine, we'll find out on the ECC injury report tomorrow night, but I'd imagine Layla's fine, I hope. She had that look like an ankle or something early in the game, too, but she obviously played after she went in the locker room. Someone on the phone, guys, or I'm confused. It was like on hold and it wasn't. Okay. I don't really want, just tell him to call back later. I'm not gonna, yeah. Rolling along on Drive Time, final show of the week, and we've got to dive into some breaking news that came across, about 10, 15 minutes ago on the final day of the transfer portal window. The final and only transfer portal window of the new college football calendar. Remember, Fran Brown said, I'm going to go out and I'm going to get 2 quarterbacks in the portal is what we want to do. And people were kind of like, wow, that's a lot of quarterbacks to go out and try and get, Fran. We'll see how you do. at that, and he went out and got 3 quarterbacks. Final day of the portal window, and Syracuse has added Malachi Nelson as the quarterback that they are bringing in. Malachi Nelson from UTEP, before that, Boise State, before that, USC, and before that, the number 1 high school recruit in the class of 2023. This is a really fascinating pickup. Pete Thamel is reporting that Nelson is preparing to come here and compete for the starting job. Obviously, Steve Angeli, on paper right now, in terms of college production, looks like a better option than Malachi Nelson. Honestly, when I heard the name Malachi Nelson was going into the portal again, after he was a former 5-star recruit, consensus 5-star, top 10 player no matter where you look, basically, on recruiting rankings. And again, ESPN had him as the number 1 overall recruit in 2023. When I heard he was going into the portal and looking for his 4th school in 4 years, I figured it was not going to be a power conference school, because he has progressively gone down. After starting at USC, not playing there as a freshman, which isn't that shocking, but he was considered a huge high school recruit, went to USC, a guy from California. Makai Lemon, who is a terrific wide receiver for USC, was on the same high school team as Malachi Nelson, this quarterback that they have just recently added from the portal for Syracuse. And they put up big-time numbers offensively in high school together, and now the narrative has kind of shifted to Makai Lemon made Malachi Nelson into a 5-star player. And he has become a little bit of a punching bag and a joke, the way that Tate Martell was a huge high school recruit, and it never really worked out for him, and he ended up having to go to a lower level. You see that from time to time. When you look at the numbers for Nelson in his career so far, he threw 3 passes for USC in his freshman season, didn't really even play at all, and moved on to Boise State, where you thought when he went to Boise State, he would be probably the starter there. He was not the starter there. He threw just 17 passes in his sophomore season, was 12 for 17 at Boise State, 128 yards passing, 1 interception, 0 touchdowns, took 2 sacks. Last year at UTEP, he started 6 games. He played in 10. He had a 55% completion percentage, about 1,100 passing yards, and threw 9 interceptions compared to 8 touchdowns, and took 10 sacks in 6 starts in 10 games. 104 for 190 through the air, a 55% completion percentage. He's not much of a rusher. This is a tall, lean quarterback that in theory has a terrific arm and has the measurables that a lot of high school evaluators and recruiters were drooling over when he was a 5-star prospect out of California. He's 6'3", 193 pounds, at least listed on the ESPN site. And again, he's coming off a season for UTEP that was pretty mixed. 8 touchdown passes, 9 interceptions. Started 6 games for UTEP. I don't think that Steve Angeli's job is necessarily in jeopardy here. I feel like this is Fran Brown seeing a uber-talented player in the portal and following the same blueprint that he had for a lot of the guys that he seems to be going after in the transfer portal. If you're looking for trends and things to try and piece together for what Fran Brown is looking for and who is rising to the top of his boards and the scouting department and the coaching staff's boards at Syracuse when they're evaluating transfer portal prospects, we are noticing a trend that they are trying to identify a 5-star or a 4-star player or a former highly rated high school player that went to a big program and it didn't pan out. And I think this is a good avenue to try and explore from Fran Brown. Money does not grow on trees for Syracuse and what they have at their disposal in the transfer portal. They were not going to get a huge quarterback to come to Syracuse, given that Darian Mensah just left Duke and was making $4 million and probably is leaving Duke because he wants to make even more money. The price tag for quarterbacks is astronomical right now. The price tag for a lot of players in the portal is astronomical right now. And Fran Brown, not to say he's playing money ball, but Syracuse is in a position where they can't compete with Miami in terms of their resources, and Miami just went and added more resources the way they're doing in the college football playoff. So they're trying to find little spots in the market, basically, where they could maybe overachieve based on some loopholes, I guess you could call it, some areas that maybe are there for the taking. And it seems like one of those areas Fran Brown is trying to explore is the post-type sleeper. I keep using that phrase. And what I mean by that is a high school prospect who was someone that Fran Brown probably knew about then because he was a huge name around the sport in high school recruiting. And Fran Brown knows everyone there is to know in high school recruiting. And it did not work out for them. And now he's trying to take someone from the mold of all the right measurables, all the right tools, and see if they can develop him into harnessing that skill set and getting some proven production out of them at the power conference level when they are at a lower stock level than they were before they went to high school. He's trying to buy low on some players here that have all the talent in the world, and they just probably need some coaching and some tutelage to get there. Malachi Nelson is the exact type of player that fits that mold that he has been going after. And it's possible that Fran Brown wasn't really sure if he was going to go after him or not, and maybe it's the last day of the portal window and Nelson doesn't have any other power conference looks. Maybe he does have our other power conference looks. Who really knows? But it seems like it's worth a flyer, and it seems like they clearly put in a lot of their capital towards backup quarterback in the offseason here because they don't want what happened last year to happen again. And frankly, if what happened last year happens again, Fran Brown understands that he goes from a coach that everyone wanted after his first season at Syracuse to a coach that is on the hot seat, maybe. That's how quickly it can change in college football. They're not going to be starting a lacrosse player at quarterback next year, clearly. They're not going to let it be a free fall at the quarterback position like what we saw this past year. Now, some of you might bring up, well, Ricky Collins passed the test of a post-type sleeper, and Fran Brown went after him, and look how that worked out. They did do a good job, though, I would say, in the portal of also bringing in someone who is the opposite of the post-type sleeper. He is the lower-level quarterback from Kennesaw State in Amari Odom, who does have proven production. It's just at a lower level. And maybe that works out. Maybe that's not Trinidad Chambliss, but there's a lot of stories and a lot of examples of quarterbacks that started at a low level and they worked their way up. The guy we were just talking about with Chris Brown a lot, Josh Allen, is another example of that. Again, I'm not saying Amari Odom is going to be that, but Fran Brown seemingly dedicated a fair amount of resources here to the quarterback position. They added not one, not two, but three more quarterbacks. And they've added some talent to the QB room, and they've added some production, and last year is not going to happen again. They are not going to see a drop-off, the likes of which I can't recall ever seen at the backup quarterback position at a power conference level. What happened last year was unacceptable. Fran knows it can't happen again, and he has course-corrected and added three quarterbacks out of the portal, and the latest is a very fascinating pickup here on the final day of the portal window. We'll take our final timeout. I see the phone lines are ringing. We can get to your thoughts in our final segment on all of this if you'd like. 315-437-7644. We're back with more Drive Time. Yeah, D.R. Johnson. It's a little different. He's had major character issues, too. Yeah, Dante Moore. Plus, they have to be paying Dylan Raiola a good amount of money. I mean, I know he probably knew he was going to be the backup, but they are... The money that some of these schools have and they're shelling out for quarterback is downright silly. All right, San Diego Cuse. I mean, Ricky threw a touchdown pass against Clemson. Remember that? I'm just joking with you, though. Yeah, I don't know if Johnson... I mean, he could be a security option, I guess, but they need him to be a running back. Yeah, I don't think that's far off, Philly. I think that's pretty much spot on. Phone's ringing again, guys. I was going to look at the YouTube chat. I don't even think our YouTube's going. What happened? YouTube. We have neglected the YouTube chat today. I did not read that story, Ryan, about the cornerback. That's odd. You want them to go get Dior? We got people calling in, one in zone defense. Shout out, Pat. F YouTube. Yeah, we're not going to have time to talk about are the Dodgers ruining baseball. I wanted to talk about Joey Spallina being the number 1 overall player. We'll get into some lax next week. I'll have to read that, Ryan. I haven't. Where was it? Where was the article? Yeah, I agree with you, Philly. I think zone is. They should mix it in some. Just kind of funny. I agreed with Pat's take mostly, but it's just hilarious how cyclical it all is, I guess. He just said, you could actually find it on our Twitter page, pretty much. If you go to CuseSports.com, you'll see it. He just said they should play some zone, or he liked that Red was mixing it in.
ESPN Radio 97.7 and 100.1. ESPN 97.7 and 100.1. Watch live on CuseSportsTalk.com.
Final segment of the week has gotten a little juicier here on Drive Time as we bring you back in. We're reacting to the latest quarterback portal news. Final day of the transfer portal window, and a curveball has come in from Fran Brown and company. Malachi Nelson, a former number 1 overall recruit, in the 2023 class that started his career at USC. Five-star quarterback from high school has agreed to come to Syracuse as their third quarterback pickup out of the portal. Pete Thamel reporting, the Syracuse grad. He's saying that he's coming here preparing to compete for the starting job. We'll see about that. Nelson's stats really don't jump off the page at you. He has progressively gone down in his 3 years. Started at USC, then Boise State, where he was not the starter as a sophomore, and then UTEP last year, where he was kind of a mixed bag in terms of his numbers. 8 passing touchdowns and 9 interceptions for Utah last year. Let's go to the phone lines. We've got a couple callers to get to before we wrap up our week of shows. Let's go to DJ in Cicero. Hey, DJ.
Hey, so I just want to talk about Fran Brown real quick.
Yeah.
Anybody thinks that he's on the hot seat, they're an idiot, first of all. Second of all, this is not his fault that we do not have the NIL like all these other colleges do. And the NIL is absolutely killing the sport, killing college sports, period, point blank. And on that, I think this latest signing with another quarterback, I think that's going to be a good thing. You never do know what's going to happen. And on that, Fran Brown's a great guy, and go Orange and go Bills.
I love it, DJ. We had a similar call from DJ earlier today about the women's basketball team. 2 good calls on 2 different shows today from DJ in Cicero. And let's be clear, I wasn't saying Fran Brown is on the hot seat. I was saying if it is a disaster like it was this past year, then obviously people are going to start talking. I don't think that's going to happen. I think this year was a blip for the Fran Brown tenure. I think he's going to get it back on track next year, and I like what he's doing here at the quarterback position. He identified a major problem with how he built the roster and how the roster came together last year, and he's not letting it happen again. And it's going to make for an interesting spring camp here. And I don't know. I mean, some of you might get worried, oh, does this mean Steve Angeli's not on the right timeline injury-wise? Because remember, it was Ricky Collins who we thought was going to be the starter until basically the last couple days of the final portal window last year when you had the spring portal, and then they added Steve Angeli, and from there, it led to speculation because Collins was dealing with that thumb injury if maybe they don't have a ton of faith in Ricky Collins, and then it was basically confirmed later through Fran Brown. He didn't say it, but until after Ricky Collins struggled, but still he did confirm as much later that they went out and got Steve because they knew Ricky wasn't ready, basically. I don't think this has anything to do with that. Let's not jump to that conclusion yet, but these are all questions that we can ask Fran Brown, I'm sure, when we get an opportunity to speak to him soon. We're hoping to get him on our airwaves next week, and there's a lot to ask Fran Brown about how this portal process went down. The Michael Smith story from South Carolina. The nice thing is when you ask Fran Brown questions, all you get are honest answers back. And I'm sure we'll get some honest and transparent answers when we get a chance to speak to him. And I like what he's doing here in terms of exploring this avenue of a player that was very well thought of in high school that didn't get an opportunity at a big program. DJ's right about the NIL point there. And I have said a couple different times on this show that if Fran Brown, I've copied what Steve has said on Orange Nation, if Fran Brown can't turn this thing around at Syracuse, then I don't really know if someone can turn it around necessarily. He's got the vision. He's got the work ethic. He's building the culture in the right way. He's checking all of those boxes. And he's doing what he can. It's hard to check literally every box when Syracuse doesn't have the money that we're seeing thrown around here in terms of what Miami is throwing around for quarterback and what Oregon is throwing around and so on and so forth. Let's end with Michael and Manlius, who has been waiting patiently. I appreciate you holding for a little bit, Michael, and this will be great. We'll end the week on a positive thought if I know you. What's happening and what's on your mind?
All right, what's up, Tim?
Not much. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. All right, so I'm not usually listening and watching the women's game in basketball, but I was on the coach's show of Autry's show last night, and I listened to the three overtime thriller. And I got to say this. If nobody said it yet, I got to say it. We got to start calling her Darren Dominique Darius. I don't know how we cannot say it. That was amazing. Absolutely amazing what she did.
Why the Darren? Fill me in here.
Darren. Like Dare.
Oh, I got you. Okay. I like it.
Darren
yeah,
Dominique Darius. hilarious.
She was bashful for sure. She was doing her thing at the end of the game. Some of the plays that she tried, I feel like no other player on the court would have tried them.
Yep, she busted through.
Yeah, and they both worked. Well said, Mike. I appreciate you chiming in to end the week. There's Michael and Manlius. That's going to wrap things up on Drive Time. Thanks to Gio and Kyle for producing. We'll talk to you next time on QSportsTalk.com.
This